Hi, I'm Casey Bell, and you're watching Writer to Writer Interviews. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Writer to Writer Interviews. I'm your host, Casey Bell, and today's guest authors are James Goi Jr. and Mitch Gray. Let's take a listen at this interview.
Hey, James, so I'm going to come right out of the box with a great question. Are you ready for this?
I think I'm ready.
Tell us how spirituality and money are related.
Well, that's a really good question. That's a great first question. The way I see it, everything is spirituality. Okay, we really live and move and have our beings within a spiritual world of energy. If we listen to the mystics, if we look at the findings of even quantum physics, modern science, there's nothing really physical about the physical world. It is a world of energy and consciousness, and anything that is not physical or material, by definition, fits the definition of being spiritual. So I start with that understanding that our lives are unfolding from a spiritual energy and consciousness, and then is projected out into what we see. So this has to do with all of our experiences, bar none, but those experiences and those objects and things that we focus on more is what we will tend to attract more of to us. And so money is a very important thing for people in modern life. And so when we focus what it really is spiritual energy, or call it mind, or when we focus that for the purpose of getting money, then that's how we can actually attract and manifest money. But it really is a spiritual process.
That actually hits on one of my favorite statements. Everything is spiritual. Everything is spiritual. So that leads to the question, if someone sees your books and your content, is it really possible to attract money?
Well, that's a really good question. Everybody is attracting money already. And I like to tell people that everyone is already a mind power master. And what I mean by that is that they are creating within their lives and attracting into their lives exactly the correlate to what they are thinking and feeling in their lives about any particular subject. So not only is it's possible, but we're already doing it. In fact, our entire lives, money and otherwise, are unfolding from our thoughts and our spiritual energy. Now, the problem is, if you want to call it that most people don't know that that's what's happening. They don't understand the process. They think it's, the luck of the draw and who you know and business cycles and your education and all of this. It's none of that. It's the mind. And so everyone is already doing it. But when you learn that you're doing it, and then you learn some techniques to be able to do it in a conscious way with specified goals and ends in mind, that's when the magic starts, because that's when we start getting more of what we want and less of what we don't want in our financial lives and in our lives in general.
Yeah, that's powerful. It's almost like raising your level of awareness and your level of existence. Yeah.
Right. It's definitely a higher level of awareness when you realize that you're creating it all as you go along.
Right. So I talk to a lot of people who are into the metaphysical, especially on the scientific side of that. You talk to other people who are into finances, building revenue, increasing profit. But how are those two things potentially correlated, the metaphysical and money?
Right. Well, when we bring the understanding of metaphysics to business, that's when the real power starts. Now, there are a lot of people that are very goal-oriented and business savvy and all of that, networking and, the tech end of it and everything, but they don't understand the mind power part of it. But when you start to explain it to them, or as someone who understands mind power, you just kind of study them and see, well, how do they think? How do they speak? What kind of things do they do? Where is their energy? Where is their consciousness? You see that it's a metaphysical proposition. So people in business who are successful, and you can be literally a billionaire and know nothing about mind power. But
Yes.
if you look at the billionaire example, you see that he's thinking as if, he's speaking as if, he has a high level of belief in himself. He has a good, healthy self-image. Not only that he can do these things, but that he deserves to have the results of his work. And they're visualizing inadvertently, even if they've never heard the word, they're having images within their minds. They're speaking certain words and thinking of certain end results. It's all mind power. And so, but when we come to the arena of business with the understanding of mind power, then again, we can apply it in a more direct way. It helps us to have fewer setbacks and to make fewer mistakes because we're guided more in the process. But again, people can be extremely successful without understanding any of this. But if you look at them and study them, you see that they're actually doing it.
You glossed over something that I want to come back to. You said people have it in their mind that they deserve what they get, what they're earning, what's coming to them. That's a powerful statement that I think so many of us forget oftentimes, that we do deserve what, it's almost this idea of dishonor, that we don't deserve it. So we
Right.
miss out on the good things in life. That's really powerful.
Yeah, well, in my book, How to Attract Money Using Mind Power, I have a chapter on self-image specifically, because the mind power techniques themselves are so powerful that you can use them and you can attract money. I mean, it's going to happen no matter what your level of self-image is. I mean, if you do affirmations, if you're thinking about the end results you want, if you're having images of things you want, you're having positive emotions, this is all mind power, you're going to attract those things. But unless you have the self-images of a person who actually deserves to have them, then you will find it going out just as quickly as it comes in, and you'll self-sabotage yourself in many ways. So, but when we bring that understanding into it and we increase the level of our self-image to match that, a person who deserves as much as what we're bringing in or amassing, then we're much more stable in being able to hold and manage these increasing levels of wealth.
So talking about self-image, I have to ask, what inspired you to talk about money from the perspective of metaphysics, spirituality, mind power? There had to have been something in your life that inspired that. That's not just happenstance, right?
Yeah, that's right. When I first came to California, I grew up in New Jersey, and I came to California, I was 19 years old. And one of my great needs for anybody starting out in life, I guess, but it was money. And within the first couple of years or so here in California, I started finding my first books on manifesting and mind power, law of attraction type teachings, spirituality, metaphysics, all of this. And Think and Grow Rich was one of the first books I read, Magic of Believing by Claude M. Bristol, Power of Your Subconscious Mind. And I immediately recognized that this was the missing link. Like, this is what I had always known. There was something missing, but it seemed like nobody knew about it, but I knew it was really important. Certainly nobody I knew about it. And I immediately recognized this is that thing I've been feeling that I felt like everyone was missing and no one was talking about. And so when I understood that, I immediately recognized that the main thing I have to do right now is to use this new understanding to attract money to myself, because I'm dying on the vine. Like, I barely, having food to eat, and just, really for a while I was bouncing around in hotels down in what they called Skid Row in San Diego. They called it the Bottoms. I think it's all been raised now and built new buildings and stuff. And so that was it. And also, once I started to teach this stuff around San Diego on the New Age book circuit, is what I was doing in the beginning, I routinely would see that people, even who had an understanding of my power and the attractive forces and whatnot, manifesting, they always seemed to have a problem with money in particular. And I knew that it was nothing logistical. I knew it was all a mental block, because you attract money the same exact way, the same techniques as you attract a relationship or a house or a job. but people were having more money with the money. So all of this I brought together, and I wanted to just have it a go-to source, a manual, really, a concise and usable manual on how to bring the metaphysics and the finances together. And the other thing is that I wanted it to be my first book, because I realized that if people have the financial comfort and safety and security, then they can grow in many other ways. But if they're worrying every day about just how they're going to eat or pay the rent, then they are not going to be able to, have the wherewithal and the resources to read spiritual books or go to, meetings or whatever it is that they would want to do. And so that came really into focus for me, that money is a very important part of this. And it's one of the key ways in modern society that we can use our inherent mind power.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Getting away from the book and your material, I have one last question. What's the best experience you've had in life?
The best experience I've had in life, having to do with mind power or attracting, or just
no boundaries, brother. Just the best experience.
Yeah, that's I don't know that I could ever just pick one. I think the best thing that happened to me in my life was meeting my life partner, Kathy. Yes. We've been together since in our early 20s, and we've been through hell and high water. We've learned and grown together. We've lived in a bunch of different states, and she's been with me through basically the whole journey, because it wasn't long before I met her that I started finding these books that were changing my life. And so I guess that was it. That changed my whole life. I think that the people that were most closest to, but also that significant other, or certainly anyone in your household, these are such important relationships that can literally make or break your success, in monetary terms and everything else. So I think that's the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Beautiful, beautiful.
Don't go anywhere. We will be right back after this message.
Mitch, I'm very interested in what you do, because it's an area that I know is important, but I'm not that well versed in these areas. But first, let me ask you, how did you get started in this whole basic line of work that you're doing and this focus that you have?
So it's an interesting long journey. I actually spent a lot of years in ministry as a pastor. And simultaneously, I was also working in the business world for a couple of decent sized companies in retail management. And what I found was I've had this love to be a pastor since I was a child. But I also fell in love with business. I really fell in love with the developmental side of business. I talked to a lot of people, experienced it myself, that oftentimes the workplace isn't the best. It's not the place people want to be. They kind of get up in the morning, you hear the saying, thank God it's Friday. That's not a great saying. Like, we shouldn't be living our week hoping for Friday. But the reason that's happening is people aren't fulfilled, and the workplace has a lot to do with that. So I got away from ministry over the years, got away from church work, still have a pastor's heart and a love for business. And so I thought, what would it look like to marry those two together? To be able to develop business leaders, to understand how to develop their people better, to help equip people to step into their dreams more powerfully, whether that's pivoting careers or engaging more deeply in the career they're in. And so really it's about empowerment from a leadership level and from a personal development level. So it's a beautiful thing to help people understand that everything is spiritual. We touched on that, and that it makes sense to kind of bring in personal relationships into the marketplace. And it actually can grow your business if you do that.
Right, that's great. And then that focus and interest and area of expertise that you're developing led you to where now you're working on a book on this subject. The title of your book is How to Hire and Keep Great People, your go-to guide for designing culture, finding great people, and designing your dream team. Do I got that right?
Yes, that's my newest book. Hopefully it'll be out by February. That's the goal.
By February. So what was the journey to get to where you started working on this particular book?
Yeah, so I took another pivot in life. I've actually been published before in the inspirational spiritual genre. And when I moved away from kind of ministry work into more focused on business, I really wanted to touch on the key pain points that I hear from business owners constantly. And the first pain point they always bring up, if you ask a business owner, what's the greatest challenge you have? 9 times out of 10, they'll say, we can't find great people. We can't keep good people. And my rebuttal is, no, you can find great people. We can go out and walk the street and in 10 minutes find great people. The question becomes, can you develop those people to become great people within your company, within your culture? And the reason people leave jobs is because culture is bad. If you look at the data over the years, people don't leave jobs because of money. They take jobs because of money, but they stay or leave at a job because they feel empowered. They have permission to think and to have idealism and to take ownership. So my real challenge with this book is to help open the eyes of business leaders to say, you can find really, really good quality people. Can you develop them? And the key to developing them is developing a culture of empowerment, of idealism, of transparency, and letting those people that are building that dream actually become very vital parts in that dream.
Well, that's great. And you mentioned culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear that term a lot. Can you explain to people who don't really understand what it is, even myself? I mean, like I have kind of a rough idea of what that means. Like working at Microsoft is different than working at Google, right? You know, how people.
James, you froze.
We lost him.
Yeah.
He must have totally lost connection.
Yeah, that's my only thought. Darn. Oh, he just, yeah, he's probably going to log back in soon.
This is a great platform, man.
Thanks. It wasn't my idea, actually. I'll make sure of that. I don't want to take credit. It was actually someone else's idea. Well, it was only supposed to be me, a one-time thing.
Mm-hmm.
The author who came up with it. And I told her, I said, I'm taking this and running with it. She was like, sure, go ahead. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. How many episodes have you done?
Think this one might be 23.
Cool. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, the first. Go ahead.
Once I read the idea and saw what you were doing, I was like, wow, that's really intriguing. Yeah, really cool idea.
Well, I was looking for platforms for me to be interviewed on, and I got mostly either ignored or rejected. So I said, well, maybe if I offer them something, they'll say yes. So I said, if you interview me, I'll interview you. And she was like, how about we just interview each other? We ask each other 5 questions each. And I was like, okay. And then I went, wait a second.
Yeah,
I'm going to keep doing this. So on the actual website, her name is there because I want to make sure she gets full credit.
Yeah, cool.
Okie dokie. You got it?
Yeah, I just got knocked out of there somehow.
All right. Okay, so we're at 18 minutes now. So if you could remember where you stopped off, go ahead.
Okay, so you were talking, Mitch, about explaining culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
What that means. I don't think you'd gotten too far into it. But can you kind of remember where you were on that?
Yes, great question.
Okay.
So everyone actually understands culture. We may just not define it that way. So as a personal example, everyone grew up in a certain environment. Their parents or guardians taught them certain things, whether it was belief system, faith system, things that you eat or don't eat. You can take a child, and if the dad doesn't like peas, and every time peas are put on the stove, he kind of grimaces, you can see the kids start grimacing when they see peas, right? Even though they may not have ever tried them. That's actually culture being designed into a child's life, whether we're conscious about it or it's in our subconscious. So we all grow up with culture. We may call them belief systems, we may call them other things. In the workplace, we all experience culture. If you've ever been to a store or a restaurant, and when you walk in, you can feel the energy right away. It could be a positive energy, it could be a negative energy. That's actually what we're talking about in the workplace specifically. That's culture, because it can be created. So I used to tell my team of people, we want to have momentum, we want to have energy, our physical presence has to be there, obviously smiling faces, be really engaged with people, because when someone walks by that store, they can sense that culture, they can sense that energy. So when you're dealing with leaders and employees, culture is things like a leader constantly criticizing their employees. What happens over time is they come to expect that from the leader. And so they actually start underperforming because they know they're going to get criticized. The flip side of that coin would be a leader that always empowers or gives their people permission. Hey, great job, James. Keep that up. We want to use your idea next week. We want to move forward with that. Give us some more ideas. We love what you're doing. Now people are more positive. Their demeanor changes. They actually start showing up to work early. All these things are what create culture. They're all the elements of culture. It's energy, it's optimism or pessimism, and it's all these behaviors that we put into play. So it's kind of like the dad again. The dad looks at the peas and goes, ugh, I don't like peas. And little Johnny goes, I don't like peas either. So now dad has created a culture of hating peas, right? And little Johnny's never tasted them. So subconsciously, dad has put that into little Johnny. Same way with leaders and employees and customers. If you drive by 2 restaurants, one restaurant is packed full of cars. The other restaurant has a light burning out, no cars in the parking lot. Which restaurant are you going into? The one that has energy, the one where people show up. That's actually what we're talking about when we talk about culture.
Well, that's interesting. It sounds like someone could study this, what you're talking about, and actually bring it into the home, right? The head of a household could bring all of these principles into a family.
It's no different. And I think where business leaders have made a mistake is they've compartmentalized the two. I used to say it all the time when I was in ministry. You can take great business leaders, great dads, and put them in a leadership of a church, and they lose their ever-loving mind. They lose all their common sense. It's the same in business. You can take a great dad who's doing a great job, and then they get into the place of business, and they lose their mind, and vice versa. And if we would stop compartmentalizing and find the similarities between everything, the connectedness, it actually changes the game on perspective. So you're exactly right.
Right, right. Well, that's great. And I want to go back to the writing for a minute, because I'm a writer. I'm always fascinated in other writers' processes. Do they keep a schedule? Do they write an outline for a book? Is there a lot of research involved? So can you just, from the writer's standpoint, tell us about your process with all of that?
Yeah, that's a really intriguing question. And I'm the same. I had that curiosity with other writers as well. I want to refer back to what I said earlier. I took a pivot when it came to my career and my writing and my craft. Writing spiritual books was much different for me than writing business books. I'm not by nature a how-to type of guy. I'm an idealist. I'm someone that wants to empower thought and self-discovery. That's spirituality, kind of as a genre. The business world thinks differently for some reason. They kind of want how-to guides, step by step, 1, 2, 3. So that was different for me. It's been a journey the last 2 or 3 years to learn a new style of writing. As far as approach, I've kind of always been an outline first person. I'm actually a songwriter as well, and I'm kind of that way in my music writing also, as I kind of have this idea and then I start putting skin on the idea. Books kind of work that way for me. Years ago, I had an author, a best-selling author who I contacted through social media. I was like, I need a piece of advice on writing. The creative faucet always flows. I just need to be more organized. And he was like, Mitch, the best piece of advice I can give any writer is that you have to write every day. Don't measure it. Don't look at if it's good or if it's terrible. Like, that's not the point. The point is just to keep writing every day. Do I hit every day? No, but I really try my best to somehow spend a few minutes a day writing when I'm working on a project. That does become 2 or 3 hours a day, 4 or 5 or 6 days a week until the project is done. And my guess is that's probably the discipline in some form or fashion that most writers take, because if you don't, you can't just sit there in a week and crank out a book. I mean, I don't, some people might can, but I don't think it works that way for most of us. Research in my business books, I've had to do a lot more research than I did in my spiritual books, probably because I grew up around spirituality. I grew up wanting to be a pastor. I started studying religious sources when I was really young. By the time I was 19, I had the Bible memorized in 3 different languages from front to back. So a lot of my reference sources that I used then, I kind of had them in my mind. I had them memorized. Business has been different because you always want to stay relevant and you want to give your audience something they can connect to. So it has been a little bit of a growth journey for me, which I've loved because we always want to be growing. So.
Well, that's great. There's a lot of insight in there. I want to switch gears again. And for the last question, I want to ask you about when you're building a team or when you're hiring people for your business, do you advocate any kind of personality tests? Like there's tests that I've taken them myself many years ago. I don't even know if they're still used. And then, so yes or no on that, but also beyond that and beyond education and experience, what kind of a person would a manager or business owner be looking for as a good, a person who's going to be a team player and that's got the right personality? What kind of things do you look at? Do you use any kind of tests? Number one, advocate that. And number two, what kind of people make the best team players in a business?
I love that. As far as personality tests go, my first piece of advice would be, if you're not going to use them, don't have your people take them. I've dealt with a lot of companies that they give these personality tests, but then they don't use them. And so that's a waste of energy. I don't believe in wasting energy. I would not use personality test for hiring. I would take advantage of personality tests for fitting people into their best place of possibility. So you want to make sure everything is in alignment. And I think a lot of business leaders miss that. They just hire someone at random almost. That's why they have so many issues, because they don't focus on alignment. So personality tests can be a very empowering tool to say, hey, James actually fits this job better than the job we thought we hired him for, because we see his personality and his strengths and weaknesses. That's what a smart leader is going to do. So yes, use personality tests if you're using them for alignment. Otherwise, don't waste your energy. We're looking for people, any business leader should be, that have the intangibles. So we're talking about great character, hardworking, going to be dependable, whatever that looks like. They're open-minded and willing to learn. And more than anything, they have great energy. Energy is the one immeasurable that so many people forget, because it's the old saying, one bad apple spoils the whole bunch. So we want to make sure people have the intangibles. I think a mistake that businesses make quite often, especially in the corporate world, is you look at job descriptions and they want people to walk in the door with all these certifications and all of this knowledge. I'm not worried about that. Let's remove the things like a doctor or a teacher or a lawyer where someone needs to have those degrees. Let's remove that very minute percentage. The majority of jobs in the world, you don't need a certification. I can teach you that. You don't need a certain piece of expertise. I can teach you that. And I think where companies could flip the game is hire based on intangibles, energy, work ethic, character, and then actually invest in their people after they're hired and say, hey, James, we need you to have this SAS certificate. We're going to pay for you to get that. And then you'll have the certificate while you're with us. And then if you move on, it'll equip you to do something else. It's actually shown in the data that companies that reinvest in their people that way have a longer sustaining culture and a longer sustaining workforce. People will stay at jobs that they get invested in. So hire on intangibles and then teach the rest. And that'll change the game when it comes to developing a team.
Great advice. I mean, I really learned a lot talking to you. There's some things in there that I wouldn't have just thought of. So thanks. That's been great.
Awesome.
Mitch Gray is the leader of Shift Culture Consultants, a published author and an award-winning songwriter. For more information on Mitch Gray and his business, and to contact Mitch Gray, go to his website, shift.llc. That's shift.llc. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back after this message. Are you a guest looking for a host to interview you? Or are you a host looking for guests to interview? Radio Guest List is the website for you. It's a free listing of guests looking for shows to interview them, as well as a free listing of shows looking for guests. Whether you're looking for a guest to interview or shows to interview you, go to radioguestlist.com. Did you use a publishing company, and were you satisfied with their services in the sense that you would suggest them to someone else who's looking to publish a book? Mitch, you can go first.
Yes, I've used a few different publishing companies. The last book that I wrote, I self-published. It was through a company called lulu.com. I will obviously recommend them because I just mentioned them. They were great in all facets. Their customer support was great. Their programs are great. And so, yes, I'm probably going with them again on my new book as well.
Okay, James?
Right. Well, I won't mention the name of the company because they've changed ownership and the whole deal has changed around. But I did, originally in 2007, I published with one of those author services type companies. But I took my book out of print for a year or two, I guess, and I've written a bunch of other books. And now I don't go through a company. I do everything myself. So I have someone who helps me with the covers, with the interior formatting. I have a girl who does the ebook formatting. And so I really, I've bought my own ISBNs, a big, huge block of them. So I do everything myself. And then I upload directly to Amazon for Kindle and print, and for I use Smashwords if I want to get my ebooks out to other locations like Barnes and Noble and all of that. So I've kind of cut out now that I know more, I've cut out that author services type of a business. But I do recommend that people self-publish, whether they use a company or do it themselves like I'm doing, because otherwise you're years and years out, unless you already have a huge platform and already are famous. This is just a wonderful way to go today, to get straight to the marketplace, right to your reader.
Agreed.
Okay, so last question. You each have a minute. James, you can go first. If there's an author, dead or alive, you'd like to meet to have a conversation with, who would it be?
If you asked me tomorrow or yesterday, it might have been a different answer. But today, I'm really thinking it would, because there's so many great writers. But Wallace D. Wattles, who wrote The Science of Getting Rich, which is the book that inspired Rhonda Byrne to write the movie and the book, The Secret. His book, The Science of Getting Rich, Wallace D. Wattles, is fascinating. It's short, it's concise, but it really packs a lot of power. And so I would recommend that author. He's only written a few books, but I would recommend that book specifically, but that author, and it would be great to sit down and talk with him. Yeah.
Okay, Mitch?
I would say, for many reasons other than just books, Thich Nhat Hanh, the Buddhist monk. Yeah, he would be incredible to sit with, drink tea with, pick his brain, find out all the experiences he had and what led him to kind of where he ended up in life.
Well, that's all for today's episode of Writer to Writer Interviews. Thank you for watching. I'd like to thank our guests, Mitch Gray and James Goi Jr. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Have a great day.